Hi everyone, it's Diana, the host of the Meeting Room podcast. And here we talk about what matters to us and discuss innovations in the IT industry. This time, Brian Agee from Dev.Pro Top Management Group is here with us to go over cultural differences and the importance of people-driven approach. Hi Brian, it's a great pleasure to see you here, that you could join us today. And just to give a little bit of vision to our listeners, so Brian is a Chief Revenue Officer in Dev.Pro, an international company with a great percentage of Ukrainians in it. So it's an interesting story. And to start off, Brian, it would be really great if you could just share your career path with us, like really quickly, just the highlights. How did you happen to be where you are now?
Yeah, happy to do it. And first and foremost, thank you so much for having me, and really feel privileged and excited to be on the podcast with you and be able to spend the next 15, 20 minutes just kind of talking about all things Dev.Pro. So very cool. A little bit about me. So I was born and raised in Kentucky here in the United States. Lived in Kentucky my entire life in a town called Louisville. Was born there, went to grade school there, went to high school there, and then moved to Lexington, Kentucky, which is about 60 miles away, for college. So I spent the first 18, 20 years of my life in Kentucky and never living anywhere else. And once I graduated from college, decided I wanted to do something different. So booked a one-way ticket out to Arizona, moved out to Arizona. I had some family out there and really didn't have a plan or an idea or a job lined up or anything other than I knew I wanted to experience something outside of Kentucky. When I got to Arizona, I got linked up with a really nice ownership group that owned a company called Venacom. At that point, it was about a 5-year-old organization. It was in the telecommunications industry. Ended up joining that organization in 2005 and really had a nice, fun kind of ride with them. And I stayed with them all the way through 2020 and still really good friends with the owners. I started out about employee number 10 and in 2005. And when ultimately we kind of parted ways, or that journey ended in 2020, we had about 180 employees, and I was in the role of Vice President of Sales. So really cool start. So that's kind of what got me into the technology industry.
Wow, that's great. Such a long time with one company, and like as a chance to get so many achievements in it. Okay, so how did it happen that you joined an international company? How did you find Dev.Pro?
Yeah, so kind of an interesting story. So I happened to get reached out to connected on LinkedIn with Dev.Pro recruiter. So really wasn't looking to work for an international company and kind of wasn't sure what my next career move was going to be. The recruiter reached out. We had some nice interactions via LinkedIn messages, then moved on and had some nice interactions via Zoom call. And yeah, it turned out to be a really cool opportunity at Dev.Pro that we decided to explore.
Well, kudos to recruiters that they actually got reached to you and it all worked out. So talking just about the differences you could have faced, I bet it's a different culture. So since you worked in an American company before and now you joined this like dynamic international environment, did you face any challenges? Like, do you have any stories about that?
Yeah, I wouldn't say any real challenges from a cultural standpoint, but I guess maybe from a personal standpoint, probably the biggest challenge was the time zone difference. So working for the organization out of Arizona, I had a lot of exposure to international customers, but never worked for an international company directly. So it was a little bit of an adjustment process with the time zone, primarily because I have 2 young daughters, and anyone that follows me on LinkedIn, I post about them quite a bit. So when they're waking up in the morning and eating breakfast and getting ready for school and checking their homework and those type of things, that's kind of the meat of the day in Europe. So that's taken a little bit of an adjustment to kind of figure out how to handle, the personal side of my life with the time with the work side. But I wouldn't necessarily call it a challenge, just a little bit of a change of schedule. One of the things that has impressed me probably the most about working with, particularly with Dev.Pro, is our contractors' ability to speak multiple languages. So I'm not shy to tell you, I am not an artistic person. That is not my strong suit. And I some days feel like I have a hard enough time mastering one language. So it was really amazing and impressive to me that everyone within Dev.Pro speaks multiple languages, including English. So really cool, because I know that's a limitation of mine.
Actually, most Americans say that because I used to live in the US and I used to hear it pretty often that like, hey, you know more than one language. That's more than enough. We Americans don't do that. So yeah.
Is really impressive is the ability to change from one language to another. Sometimes where I'll join a Zoom call and the team will be, speaking in Ukrainian, and then I'll join and at the snap of a finger, they switch to English, and like, I don't see how they do it. It's hyper impressive.
So, okay, and how about similarities?
I think when I look at, my past business experience in DevPro, regardless of time zone or cultural differences, ultimately some of the same business principles will apply. And that's another thing that really impresses me about DevPro, and specifically the sales and marketing team and the delivery teams that I have the privilege of working with. And for me, it kind of really comes down to two core business principles. One is follow through, communicate. And the second is do what you say you're going to do. It's amazing to me sometimes where people try to overcomplicate kind of the basic principles of business. You just communicate, honestly and effectively and quickly. And then number two, follow through and do what you say you're going to do. I think that kind of transcends culture or time zone and really the most important thing.
It's really great that you mentioned that because actually the next question that I wanted to ask you was about the business communication, I guess. As you know, many Ukrainians who are engaged in IT mostly working with foreign clients and American clients as well. Do you have any advice? Like what advice would you give to specialists who work with American clients directly?
Good question. I guess my number one advice would be to work really hard to build not only a professional relationship with the client or with your contacts, but build a personal one as well. There's a phrase that I talk to the sales team about quite a bit, which is ultimately people do business with people they like. So it's important that we deliver on time, we meet customer expectations, we create a quality product. But equally as important, that we get to know the individuals that we're working with, whether we ask about their personal life or their spouse or significant other or their kids or what they did that weekend, and find commonality outside of just the professional atmosphere.
I think what you're talking about may be called a small talk. Other great cultural difference in regards to Americans is I myself used to work for an American company for many years, and when I joined Ukrainian one, it was so weird for me first week or months because anytime I would join the call, they would say hi and go straight to the point. Like, hi, okay, what we got? And in an American company, it doesn't work that way. You join the call and then you're like, hey, how are you? How's the weather? And you discuss kids and just, anything off the topic. It's also a great difference.
I would agree with you. And that's one of the things probably, I get asked quite a bit what I like most about working for DevPro or my role or my job. And I think one of the big pieces for me is that I get to have those unique conversations with customers or potential customers every single day. And every customer, every conversation is different. So I get to meet a lot of new people. And you're right, I enjoy the small talk side of it. And I find myself a lot of times on calls that we maybe have booked for 30 minutes that I end up small talking for 10 or 15 minutes. And I have to stop myself and go, okay, actually, let's talk about work now because I know everybody has things we have to accomplish. But yeah, I think it's an important piece of it, especially because you also look at what DevPro sells. Right, we sell services. It's a prolonged engagement. It's not like we're selling a product where we meet on day one, we deliver the product on day two, and we may never interact with the customer again. For us, it's this long-term integrated engagement. So I think it's important that you build that interpersonal relationship.
Mm-hmm. Maybe you have some advice on how to do that, how to build that interpersonal relationship.
I think for me, it's just about kind of being yourself and being authentic. Because I think if you get on calls or you're working to build a relationship or getting to know someone, it's very easy to spot if someone isn't being real or truthful or honest or feels uncomfortable. So, I think it's just all about being yourself, right? If you like sports or you like the outdoors or you want to talk about your kids, right? So whatever it is that interests you, use that as a jumping off point. Don't try to make up interest or to approach it of what you think the client or the other person is going to be interested in. Talk about what interests you.
That's true. And I'm actually listening to it and thinking that you can do that only like in a healthy environment. So it's another great point for specialists to find whether they are in the right environment and not toxic one. Since we have a little bit time, I would like to use your experience in sales and marketing and talk about crises and challenges that the world is going through. We live in the time when we have war, we have COVID, we have huge financial crisis going on, and it's not the end. And my question here is, what do you think about sustainable in all of this in the time of black swans? Do you have any unique recipe to deal with a crisis?
Whether it's, I think, a time of crisis like financial or war or otherwise, or even in times of prosperity, the most important thing is that we as an organization put people first. So put our employees first, our contractors first, our customers first. And if we approach those type of events with a customer first mentality, then I think that's a phenomenal jumping off point and kind of sets the stage to make sure that we effectively deal with whatever is ahead of us. And I'll use kind of the current war with Russia as an example, right? I was on C-level calls every single day, multiple times a day, still am, when we're discussing the impact of those events on the organization. And never once on those calls was it a discussion point around what's good for DevPro financially or what's good for DevPro from a growth perspective. Every one of those discussions was framed around what's good for our people, what's good for our contractors, what's good for our employees, what's good for our customers, and let's take care of them first. And then the rest will follow. So I think it's hyper important that we do always have a people first mentality. And I got to give a lot of, appreciation and admiration to Jeff and the remaining of the other members of the C-level team for really kind of guiding us through an unprecedented time. At that point, I'd only been with the organization for about 4 months. So seeing how upper level management and leadership approached that situation just reaffirmed that I made a good choice in joining DevPro and couldn't be prouder to be part of the team.
Yep. Standing at the other side of the event, I could feel that support, the sincere support from day one. It was really nice to feel that. But, the approach that you're talking about is awesome. And I think that's actually what drives innovation. And it's what's going to drive success to companies in the future and does now. But there's still some arguments that you need to focus on metrics and you need to focus on numbers. How do you align those 2 points? Because obviously, that side of the business is important as well.
Sure, it absolutely is, right? So I think approaching things first and foremost with a people first mentality, right? I think that goes without saying. And then the second piece of that, and what we talk a lot about internally, as long as DevPro as an organization is healthy and strong and stable, then we have the resources and the ability to help additional people. So that was kind of the second piece that we constantly talked about. People first, and then how do we make sure at the same time that DevPro as an organization remains strong, because then that gives us the resources to do what we need to do to make sure everyone's taken care of.
And so, as I understand, you also work with new and potential clients, right?
Absolutely.
Do you have your viewpoint on how just international IT market have changed recently?
I guess I don't have necessarily a viewpoint on changes in the international market, but I will say it's a crowded space at the moment. Obviously, up until recently, the economy was booming, technology industry was booming, the recruiting market was hot, especially for extremely talented, experienced developers. So I think the challenge for us and what my team and I are constantly working to do on a day-to-day basis is separate DevPro from the noise of the rest of the community, right? Because there's a lot of companies out there that are attempting to sell outsourced software development services. DevPro is at the upper echelon of that group, and the service offering that we provide is unique and high level, and we have a lot of differentiation between us and some of those other organizations. So I think that's our biggest challenge, is separating ourselves from the noise and getting the opportunity to present the DevPro story to our customers.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying that the competition is still high?
Yeah, competition is very high, for sure. In almost every new opportunity that we're winning, there are multiple vendors in there. The customer's interviewing multiple options. It's not just what we deliver, it's how we deliver it. So there's a lot of companies that can do software development. But I think what makes us special and what makes us unique is the relationship that we build with the clients, how Maxim and his delivery group, implement the day-to-day and deliver the product, how we recruit high quality staff, and how we're really looking for not just a customer, but for a true partner. And I think that's why we see such a long duration that our customers stay with us and rely on us.
Yeah, and actually pretty exciting projects are going forward from what I heard. Actually, getting more excited.
Really robust pipeline. We brought on a handful of new projects, and I know that we want to bring on new projects, number one, but number two, we want to bring on new projects that are interesting, exciting, and that our staff would jump up and raise their hand to work on. So it's not just about the new project, it's about the domain that it's in and what we're delivering and the excitement it can create for the organization.
Okay, so I guess we went actually so many topics in just like 20 minutes or so, and we covered everything that we wanted to cover. Like, that's the format that we want to keep, just short, up to the point, and I guess we've done a really great job here. Thank you a lot, Brian, for joining us today. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, and hopefully we can do it again soon.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. Stay tuned and don't forget to subscribe to our channel not to miss a single episode. I hope to see you soon.